Sonic Forces was a Sonic the Hedgehog game released in 2017 to, mixed reception. From the moment the game was first released until the moment people stopped caring about it, Sonic Forces found a niche as the internet's punching bag. From YouTubers to Twitter users to my friends at school and even the degenerates that for whatever reason think that using Reddit isn't a crime against humanity, it really felt like everyone was talking about Sonic Forces and no one had anything nice to say. People criticized its gameplay, its level design, its boss fights, its story and character writing. Hell, they even criticized its name and box art. Which is kind of valid because this means nothing and this looks like an Ant-Man and the Wasp poster, but that's besides the point. Sonic the Hedgehog is a very inconsistent franchise with high highs and low lows, and to many, Sonic Forces was one of the lowest of those lows. The gaming community at large, already incredibly unhappy with the current state of the Sonic franchise, saw this as a second coming of 06 and treated it as if it was. Even I participated, and I wouldn't even play the game for another 3 years. But now that it's been a few years and the hate has died down and people have moved on and the franchise has begun to repair its reputation through movies, TV shows, game compilations, and Sonic Frontiers, I can't help but wonder if all this hate was really justified. If people were actually this upset or if they were merely jumping on the latest internet bandwagon. After all this time, I can't help but wonder if Sonic Forces was really that bad. Starting off with the game's main selling point and the only thing I've never seen anybody complain about, one of the first things you do while playing Sonic Forces is make your custom character. That's right, Sega saw the downright insane amount of Sonic fan art online and thought that it would be a good idea to let people make their OCs in an actual mainline Sonic game. This is my OC. Her name is Bigette the Sexy Cat. She is Big the Cat's girlfriend and they kiss each other on the lips a lot. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to make her in Sonic Forces. The actual customization features are a little basic, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Not every game needs to be Skyrim. And the developers did do a great job of providing the player with a lot of options to make the character that they wanted to make. And as you play the game more and more, you can unlock all sorts of outfits and accessories to dress up your OC and really show your personality. Gamer! This feature was loved by pretty much everyone, and the best thing about the game's launch was seeing everyone post their goofy little characters. Most YouTubers just made Sonic, Alfred, Joe Sniffy, and Keely Clove made Deku, some people made their actual real OCs, other people made other things, and the first time I beat this game, I made Woody Woodpecker. And the second time, I made Garfield. This time, I made Winnie the Pooh. So clearly, my creativity knows no bounds. I really like the character customizer, but the game is a lot more than just an OC generator, so let's talk gameplay. There are 3 playable characters in Sonic Forces: Modern Sonic, Classic Sonic, and the custom character who is exclusively referred to as you or Rookie. Personally, I mainly call him Dead Weight, but you can call him for a good time. All 3 characters have their own stages, gameplay, and abilities that set them apart from one another, and you swap between them as you progress through the game. Wow! It's just like Sonic Adventure! That's a good game! Maybe this'll be a good game too! Modern Sonic's gameplay is actually pretty solid. He feels fast and fluid and controls really well, and I never feel like I'm fighting the controller or the camera, which really isn't something that can be said about every 3D Sonic game. All in all, Forces Sonic is a pretty average example of Boost-era Sonic, which is either a really good thing or a really bad thing depending on whether or not you like the Boost formula. I personally really do. And his levels are easily the best in the game. I mean, sure, they're incredibly simple and you can beat most of them by holding down one button and jumping occasionally, but none of them are actively bad, just basic and forgettable, and they do a really great job of making you feel like you're just absolutely gunning it, and that's exactly what I want out of a Sonic game. The modern Sonic levels as a whole are a lot of fun, and while I wouldn't call any of them great, I wouldn't call them bad either. And if the game was exclusively comprised of these levels, it probably wouldn't have been as poorly received as it was. Unfortunately, there are 2 other playable characters. Classic Sonic, on the other hand, is a bit of a mess, kind of like the explanation for why he's even here. He feels really slow and clunky, which is weird because he should have been the easiest of the 3 characters to program. Sonic Team has a long history of making incredible 2D Sonic games, and Forces released the same year as Mania and uses the same classic Sonic design as Generations, both of which are games with some of the best 2D Sonic gameplay in the franchise, which begs the question, why does this feel like ass? Classic Sonic feels like he's moving through syrup when he's on the ground, and I feel like I have next to no control over his momentum when he's in the air, which is weird because fast ground speed and high aerial mobility are the 2 things I most associate with 2D Sonic. And as far as his level design goes, it's interesting. The classic Sonic levels have a heavy emphasis on precision platforming as opposed to just getting to the end of the level as fast as possible. And although slow, precise platforming isn't really what anyone thinks of when they hear Sonic the Hedgehog, this kind of gameplay isn't exactly out of place. The early games on Genesis are full of this kind of slow, precise platforming, and those games are exactly what classic Sonic's gameplay is supposed to be based on. Of course, he controls a lot better in those games, and I rarely feel like I'm actively fighting the original trilogy's controls or physics when I'm playing them, so it's not a perfect replica, but it mostly gets the job done. And while this kind of gameplay is never what I'm looking for when I play a Sonic game, I'm also never gonna be upset that it's here. It makes sense and it fits. And a lot of the levels are actually pretty fun once you get used to classic Sonic, even if they are extremely bland and simplistic and feel like an afterthought. Now, the custom character is easily the worst of the 3. There is no consistency to his gameplay or level design, and he swaps between 3 different modes seemingly at random. Sometimes his levels look identical to modern Sonic levels, but just really slow and without any of the cool moments that make modern Sonic levels feel so fun and stylish. Sometimes they're very mild attempts at precise platforming, but with a character whose physics just aren't designed for that sort of gameplay. And sometimes they're this. Doesn't that look fun? On top of being slow, the Rookie has 3 main abilities that set him apart from every other playable character in franchise history. He has a grappling hook that basically does the exact same thing as Sonic's homing attack, which makes both characters feel significantly less unique. He has a set of Wisp abilities that change depending on what gun he has equipped and allow him to skip entire sections of the stage. And he has a blaster, which would be really cool if it required you to do anything other than hold down one button. In my first playthrough, I messed around with all of the different weapon types a bit, but this time around I only really used the default flamethrower because it is the most consistent at dispatching large groups of enemies quickly, and that means the Rookie stages are over faster. I really don't like these levels, and I think that the game would be a lot better if the Rookie wasn't here at all. I mean, we'd lose out on things like the custom characters and the double boost moments, which would suck because those are really sick, but they just aren't worth dealing with this. Modern Sonic is easily the best of the 3 characters, and I really think that the game would have been a lot better if the developers had focused all their attention onto making good levels for 1 character instead of passable levels for 2 and horrible levels for a 3rd. Classic Sonic is pretty hit or miss. His levels are all either pretty good or really bad with absolutely no in-between, and he really only has 1 level that I'd call actively great. And of course, it's fucking Green Hill Zone again. And the Rookie is just a mess from top to bottom. And the level themes as a whole are really disappointing. There is a large and diverse roster of locations and stages, but they're all either forgettable, blend together with other similar locations, or are returning stages from previous games. And they all get reused and remixed to death. It honestly gets really tedious revisiting Metropolis, Luminous Jungle, or this game's version of Chemical Plant Zone for the 3rd or 4th time when I already didn't care the first time. So many of them look like they were designed entirely using pre-made royalty-free assets and then slapped together in the shape of a Sonic tech demo. They could quite literally be from any game. I mean, you could probably put Eggman Empire Fortress in fucking Nier Automata and no one would even notice. Actually, they probably would notice because this level looks like shit. Plays like it too. There's this awesome moment around level 25 where all of the levels start taking place in Eggman Empire Fortress and the game grinds to a complete halt and everything even remotely good about the game is sucked out of it for the next 5 or so levels and is replaced with some of the slowest, most tedious, most unintuitive platforming I have ever experienced. These 5 levels were the worst part of this game the first 2 times I played it, and they completely soured my experience this time around too. Every ounce of fun I was having with Sonic Forces and every remotely positive or neutral thing I had to say about it disappears during this part of the game. This is the Sonic equivalent to the Final Fantasy 15 hallway, and it fucking sucks, and it takes up a 6th of the game and is immediately followed up by a very just okay final boss. Yeah, sure, let's talk about the bosses. The video can always be longer anyway. As a whole, there really isn't that much to say. The classic Sonic fights feel like the dev team ripped the least interesting and creative boss fights right out of the Genesis games and put them in Forces, but at the end of the day, I can't really complain because the worst original trilogy boss fights still make for a damn good time. The modern Sonic boss fights are all basically the same level in a different font, except for the Zavok fight, which is still pretty generic. For the majority of the boss fights, you basically just chase Infinite down a long hallway, dodge whatever obstacles he throws at you, and spam homing attacks whenever you get close. It fucking sucks. And they reuse it for Metal Sonic and the final boss, and this isn't even the first Sonic game to do something like this. The rookie fights are pretty forgettable, as in I literally forgot one of them was in the game at all. First you fight Infinite, then you fight a giant Bakugan. I don't know, I ran out of jokes. The fights themselves basically just boil down to dodging big attacks until it's your turn and then experiencing gameplay. I really don't like the boss fights in this game. Other than the classic Sonic boss fights, they add nothing to the game that a 15-second cutscene couldn't do better, and they really feel like they were added out of obligation more than anything else. It was like the developers said, okay, the players are definitely going to expect us to include boss fights in this game, so let's make some real quick so they have one less thing to complain about. But joke's on you, because I can complain about anything. For example, let's talk about the story. You can't really talk about Sonic Forces without talking about the story because you can't really play Sonic Forces without experiencing it. The entire game feels like it was designed around the story. Almost every level starts and ends with cutscenes and dialogue. A significant amount of levels and boss fights contain dialogue necessary to understanding the story. Instead of having levels that have nothing to do with each other and are just designed to be cool and fun like in other Sonic games, every level is directly linked to events in the story. Literally everything in this game is built around the story instead of the story being built around the game, which is a bit unusual for a Sonic game, but not unheard of. And it wouldn't even be a problem if the story wasn't terrible. The game's basic premise is Eggman won. The world has been conquered. Sonic is dead. His allies have been forced into hiding. A ragtag resistance has been formed to stop Eggman. But Eggman has a new ally. An ally with reality warping powers so powerful that he can ensure that Eggman never loses again. It's actually a really interesting premise, and I was really excited to see how this story unfolded. Unfortunately, the writers weren't really interested in telling this story. We're told in a cutscene that Sonic is dead, and then one level later we find out he's still alive. Eggman has taken over the entire world, but it's piss baby easy to take it back. Fan favorite villain Chaos shows up in a cutscene and then is also beaten in a cutscene. Even the big climactic moment where the heroes are defeated and all is seemingly lost lasts mere seconds before they're winning again. The writers clearly expect us to take this story seriously, but they refuse to commit to any of their own ideas. They don't give the heroes time to sit with their failures, they don't take the time to create the atmosphere of loss and regret necessary to telling this kind of story, and they don't provide any sort of interesting build-up or payoffs for the ideas that they are trying to present. And when they do take the time to set up atmosphere, ideas, and story beats, almost every decision they make is undone almost immediately. And when you compare it to any other piece of children's media that even attempted to do something remotely similar to this, the difference is laughable. And don't even get me started on the corny ass dialogue. This shit is miserable. It's all either exposition or quips. Just like the story, there's no substance to any of it. And the worst part is, it didn't need to be like this. There are plenty of Sonic games where the story is basically non-existent, and those are some of the best games in the franchise. It's okay to just make a good game and not have any story. And on the other hand, if you want to create a complex and well-written story, it's far from impossible with this universe and cast of characters. There are tons of great Sonic stories out there. Tons of games, TV shows, movies, and comics that are all relatively complex and well-written. Several of which have been released in the past few years. So how did Sonic Team shit the bed this badly? And speaking of shitting the bed, let's talk about the character writing. People really did not like the way the characters were written in this game, and I can't even blame them. The majority of the cast has had their personalities completely removed. They act less like actual characters and more like set dressing, only ever opening their mouths to say whatever bit of exposition the writers need them to say to further the plot. None of the lines actually feel like they were written for the specific character saying them. It feels like the writers had a list of lines they needed said, and they decided to do a round of popcorn reading until every character had something to say. And the characters that do have distinct personalities would probably be better off if they didn't. Tails, who used to be one of the most confident and dependable characters in the entire franchise, has once again been downgraded to a pathetic coward crying for Sonic to help him. Meanwhile, Amy has continued her decade-long flanderization and barely gets to speak unless she's talking to or about Sonic. And Sonic himself is at his worst and most insufferable in this game. He's just so obnoxious. Every time he opens his mouth, I want to mute the audio.
There's sand everywhere. Green Hill's looking a lot more like Sand Hill right now.
Green Hill's looking a lot more like Sand Hill.
That was a blast. Bring some chili dogs next time.
Bring some chili dogs next time.
Whoa, it's not time for thinking, it's time for running.
Good one, Sonic. I get that Sonic is supposed to be defiant and sarcastic and theoretically a part of the counterculture, but he's also supposed to be likable. The only character that I'd consider even remotely well written is Eggman. Which makes perfect sense because Sega never messes up with Eggman. Even when they had fucking Jim Carrey playing him, he was still the best thing about that movie. Sonic Forces Eggman is fun and lively and funny and charismatic and animated and likable and even a little intimidating. His personality and actions are consistent with damn near every other appearance, and if every other character was characterized even half as well as Eggman, the cutscenes probably wouldn't have felt like such a chore. And then there's a couple of other things I want to mention. The soundtrack is absolutely incredible. I mean, it's a Sonic game, so that should probably go without saying, but I cannot stress enough that this is one of the best soundtracks in the franchise. And Fist Bump in particular is really corny, but also downright incredible. The voice acting is also really good. I mean, the franchise has never had a bad voice cast, so that probably shouldn't be a surprise, but it never ceases to amaze me how these voice actors can give us such incredible and believable performances when they're saying shit like this.
Resistance in the city is reporting that whatever it is that finished Sonic. Sorry, I'm still not used to saying that.
The side content is actually kind of interesting, although I didn't really interact with it much, and the game as a whole is really stable. I did experience a few frame drops here and there, but I've beaten this game 3 times now, and I've never once experienced any glitches or bugs, game breaking or otherwise. And unfortunately, that's a really big deal for a 3D Sonic game. And that is basically everything I have to say. So, what's the verdict? Was Sonic Forces really as bad as everyone says it was? I really don't think so. Don't get me wrong, this is not a good game by any means. The levels are repetitive and simplistic, the custom character plays like shit, the boss fights are a waste of time, and the story and dialogue are laughable at best. But there's still a level of enjoyability present at every part of this game. The modern Sonic levels and a lot of the classic ones are a lot of fun despite their simplicity. The custom character is a really cool idea even if he didn't add anything substantial to the story or gameplay. I called the story and dialogue laughable, but it was still a lot of fun to laugh at it. I think the game actually looks really good most of the time even if the art direction is a little generic, and the soundtrack is genuinely incredible. The game still isn't good, but I really don't think that a game needs to be good in order for it to be fun or enjoyable. And Sonic Forces is a lot of fun. There is a massive amount of entertainment value present in this game, far beyond simply watching YouTubers shit all over it. Maybe not $40 worth of value, but I got my copy for $14, and I think that that price is more than fair. All in all, I really think that this game is fun, but mediocre at best, and disappointing, but still bearable at worst. Which isn't great, but isn't terrible either. So, to answer the question, was Sonic Forces really that bad? No. But it wasn't that good either.